Ethan Morrison didn't realize the moment his life ended was the moment he walked into the shelter. His wife kicked him out, his family turned him away, and society shut its doors. Not when he lost his job. Not when the bank took the house. Not even when his wife changed the locks and told him he was no longer her problem. No, the death of his old life happened under the harsh, humming lights of cot number 47, where a man who once designed dream homes now slept beside strangers who had none. But the universe was watching. Because within hours, the man nobody wanted, the man society stepped over, would become the name every news station in California would scramble to pronounce. And when they saw his face on TV, smiling, stunned, holding a check for $10 million, the same family that abandoned him would learn the truth. Hi, my wonderful real family. Welcome back to your own family channel again. I am always thrilled to share with you stories of the reality of life. As we go into this unforgettable story of how an abandoned father, husband and grandfather turned to become a sudden celebrity, I pray for you today that may God Almighty always turn situations around for you, for the better and for celebration. Amen. Do not forget to subscribe to this channel, like, share this story, and also comment where you are watching from, and also say, I am with you, Mr. Reality, so that this story would go all around the world to give hope and bless lives. Now, the full story. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the Riverside County homeless shelter in Sacramento, California, casting harsh shadows across the rows of metal cots that lined the converted gymnasium. Ethan Morrison sat on the edge of cot number 47, his entire life reduced to a black duffel bag at his feet and a phone with 3% battery life clutched in his trembling hands. The November cold seeped through the thin walls, and around him dozens of other forgotten souls, prepared for another night of restless sleep, punctuated by coughs, snores, and the quiet sound of grown men trying not to cry. 24 hours ago, Ethan had been someone else entirely. He had been a man with a home, with a family, with a future he thought was secure. Now, he was just another number in a system designed to warehouse the unwanted until they could figure out where else to go. He stared at the last text message his wife had sent him, reading it for perhaps the 100th time, as if the words might somehow change their meaning through repetition. They never did. Don't come back. The locks are changed. Your things are with your brother. We're done. Don't contact me again. My lawyer will be in touch. That was it. 17 years of marriage dismissed in 31 words. No explanation, no chance to fight for what they had built together. Just a cold, clinical message delivered while he was at his lowest point, when he needed her most. Ethan's hands shook as he tried to type a response, but what could he possibly say? How could he make her understand that the last 6 months had been hell for him too? That losing his job at the architectural firm where he had worked for 12 years had destroyed something fundamental inside him. That, watching their savings account drain away while he sent out resume after resume into the void, had kept him awake every night, his chest tight with anxiety and shame. He had tried to hide the extent of their financial troubles from Victoria. He had wanted to protect her, to shield her from the full weight of his failure. Every morning, he had put on his one remaining good suit and left their house in the suburbs, pretending he was going to interviews, to networking events, to meetings with headhunters. Sometimes he actually was. Most times, he sat in his car in parking lots, filling out applications on his phone, watching other people go about their lives while his own crumbled around him. When the eviction notice came, he had hidden it. When the car got repossessed, he told Victoria it was in the shop. When the credit card companies started calling, he stopped answering the phone entirely. He had thought he was being strong, being a man, being the provider he had promised to be when he stood at the altar and vowed to take care of her forever. Instead, he had been a coward. The truth had come out 3 days ago when Victoria tried to use their credit card at the grocery store and it was declined. Then another card was declined. Then another. She had come home with 2 bags of groceries she had to borrow money from a stranger to pay for, her face white with humiliation and rage, and she had demanded answers. Ethan had given them to her. All of them. The job loss, the failed interviews, the mounting debt, the foreclosure proceedings on their house that would begin in 30 days. He had watched her face transform as he spoke, watched love turn to contempt, watched the woman he had built a life with look at him like he was something that had crawled out from under a rock. "How could you?" she had whispered, and then she had started screaming. "How could you lie to me? How could you let it get this bad? What kind of man are you?" He had no answer for that. He didn't know what kind of man he was anymore. She had ordered him to leave, to go stay with his brother, to give her space, to let her think. He had packed a bag, kissed her forehead even though she turned her face away, and driven to his brother's house in Oakland, 2 hours away. But his brother, Marcus, was dealing with his own problems. 3 kids, a wife who had just lost her job, a mortgage that was underwater. There was no room for Ethan, not really, though Marcus had been too kind to say it outright. "You can crash on the couch for a night or 2, Marcus had said, but Ethan could see the strain in his brother's eyes, could hear the tension in his wife Rachel's voice when she asked how long he planned to stay. He had lasted 1 night before he knew he couldn't impose any longer. He had told Marcus he found a friend to stay with, had driven back towards Sacramento, and had spent last night sleeping in his car in a Walmart parking lot. This morning, he had received Victoria's text, and this afternoon, when his phone died and he had nowhere to charge it, he had finally accepted the reality of his situation. He was homeless. The shelter had been his last resort. He had walked through the doors at 4 in the afternoon, had stood in line behind men who smelled of alcohol and defeat, had filled out paperwork that asked questions designed to quantify exactly how far he had fallen. Did he have any income? No. Did he have any assets? No. Did he have anyone who could take him in? No. Was he fleeing domestic violence? No. Did he have any addiction issues? Not yet, but give it time. The intake coordinator, a tired-looking woman named Dolores Martinez, had processed his paperwork with efficient sympathy. She had seen 1,000 men like him, middle-class casualties of an economy that chewed people up and spit them out when they were no longer useful. She had given him a cot number, a thin blanket that smelled of industrial detergent, and a list of rules that boiled down to one essential truth: don't cause trouble, or you'll be sleeping on the street. Now, as evening settled over the shelter and men shuffled in from the cold, Ethan tried to reconcile who he had been with, who he had become. 6 months ago, he had been a successful architect. He had designed homes for wealthy clients in the Bay Area, had won awards for his sustainable building practices, and had been featured in architectural magazines. He and Victoria had lived in a beautiful 4-bedroom house in Roseville, had taken annual vacations to Hawaii, had hosted dinner parties where they served wine that cost more than some of these men probably made in a week. He had been someone who mattered. Now he was invisible, just another face in a crowd of forgotten men. "First time?" a voice asked, and Ethan looked up to see an older man settling onto the cot next to his. He was probably in his 60s, with a weathered face and kind eyes that had seen too much. He wore a faded army jacket and carried himself with a dignity that seemed at odds with his surroundings. "That obvious?" Ethan asked. "You're still in shock," the man said. "You're still thinking this is temporary, that someone's going to swoop in and fix everything. You're still wondering how you ended up here." Ethan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "Name's Walter Chen," the man said, extending a hand. "Served 2 tours in Vietnam, worked as a mechanic for 30 years, then got sick, cancer, wiped out my savings, lost my house, lost my wife. Been cycling through shelters for 5 years now." "I'm sorry," Ethan managed. "Don't be. I'm not telling you for pity. I'm telling you so you know you're not alone. Whatever brought you here, you're not the only one who's lost everything." Around them, the shelter continued to fill with men of all ages and backgrounds, young men who looked barely out of their teens, middle-aged men like Ethan, still reeling from their falls from grace. Elderly men who moved slowly, their bodies bent by years of hard living, veterans, addicts. Men with mental illnesses who talked to themselves in the corners, men who were simply unlucky, who had made one wrong decision or suffered one bad break and had never recovered. Ethan had always believed that homelessness was something that happened to other people, to those who made poor choices or refused to work hard. He had driven past men holding cardboard signs on freeway off-ramps and had told himself comfortable lies about personal responsibility and pulling oneself up by one's bootstraps. He had donated to charities occasionally, had felt virtuous about his generosity, and had never once considered that he might someday be on the receiving end of that charity. Pride, it turned out, was a luxury he could no longer afford. Dinner was served at 6 o'clock in a cafeteria-style setup. Volunteers ladled soup into styrofoam bowls and handed out rolls that were stale but edible. Ethan forced himself to eat, though the food tasted like nothing, like everything else in his life had lost its flavor. Walter sat across from him, eating methodically, and when he caught Ethan staring at his still full bowl, he nodded toward it. "Eat it, you'll need your strength." "For what?" Ethan asked bitterly. "For more of this? For whatever comes next," Walter said. "You don't know what tomorrow brings. Could be worse, could be better. But you'll need your strength either way." After dinner, Ethan borrowed a phone charger from the shelter office and plugged in his phone. As it powered back to life, messages began flooding in. Most were from bill collectors. A few were from former colleagues, offering hollow words of encouragement that did nothing to ease the crushing weight in his chest. There was one from Marcus, asking if he was okay, if he needed anything. There was nothing from Victoria. He opened his email, scrolling through the automated rejections from companies he had applied to, the spam, the advertisements for things he could no longer afford. And then he saw it, an email that had arrived at 3:47 that afternoon, while his phone was dead and his life was falling apart. The subject line read, "Congratulations, Ethan Morrison." His first thought was that it was spam, another scam promising riches if he just clicked the link and entered his bank information. He almost deleted it. But something made him open it instead. "Dear Mr. Morrison, congratulations. Your ticket number 774288319952447 has been selected as the grand prize winner in the California Mega Millions lottery drawing held on November 15th. You are the sole winner of the jackpot prize of $10 million. Please contact our office within 72 hours to claim your prize." Ethan stared at the screen, his mind unable to process what he was reading. It had to be fake. It had to be a mistake. He had bought a lottery ticket, yes, weeks ago, back when he still had $2 to spare and a desperate need to believe in miracles. He had forgotten about it completely, had probably thrown the ticket away with a pile of receipts and junk mail. His hands shaking, he opened a new browser window and searched for the California Mega Millions website. He found the winning numbers for November 15th. With trembling fingers, he opened his photo gallery, scrolling back through weeks of pictures until he found it. A photo he had taken of the lottery ticket almost as an afterthought. A joke to himself about his odds of ever winning, he compared the numbers 7742883199524. 471. They matched. Every single one. Ethan's vision blurred. The shelter around him seemed to tilt and spin. He read the email again, then checked the numbers again, certain he must have made a mistake. But no, the numbers matched. The email was from the official California Lottery Commission website. There was a phone number to call, an office to visit, forms to fill out. He had won $10 million. He sat there, phone in hand, unable to move, unable to think, unable to feel anything but a strange, disconnected numbness. Yesterday, he had lost everything. Today, he had won more money than he had ever dreamed of having. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. Walter appeared at his shoulder. "You okay, son? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I think I won the lottery," Ethan whispered. Walter laughed. "Don't we all wish? That's what keeps us going, right? the hope that something impossible might happen. No, I think I actually won. Look. Ethan held out his phone, showing Walter the email, the winning numbers, the photo of his ticket. Walter's expression changed from amusement to shock, to something like wonder. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Is this real? I think so. I don't know, it has to be real, right? I have the ticket. I took a picture of it, the numbers match. Where's the actual ticket? Ethan's stomach dropped. I don't know. It was in my wallet, I think, or maybe in the console of my car, but my car got repossessed. Or maybe it was in my desk at home, but I can't go home. Victoria changed the locks. Everything I own is at my brother's house. Then you need to call your brother. Right now, you need to find that ticket. Ethan's hands shook so badly he could barely dial Marcus's number. His brother answered on the third ring. Ethan, where are you? Are you okay? Marcus, I need you to do something for me. It's going to sound crazy, but I need you to go through my things, all the bags, everything. I need you to find a lottery ticket. It's small, white, with numbers on it. Please, Marcus, this is important. What? Ethan, slow down. What's going on? I think I won the lottery. $10 million, but I need the physical ticket to claim it. Please, Marcus, I'm begging you. There was a long pause. Then Marcus said, Hold on. Ethan waited, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Around him, the shelter continued its evening routine. Men preparing for sleep, staff checking in on those who needed medication or had medical issues. Walter stood beside him, his hand on Ethan's shoulder, an anchor in the storm. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, Marcus came back on the line. Ethan, I found something. Is it white with a bunch of numbers? Says California Lottery on it? Yes, that's it. Oh God, Marcus, that's it. Holy shit, Ethan. Are you serious? You actually won. I need you to hold on to that ticket. Don't lose it. Don't let anyone touch it. I'll come get it first thing in the morning. Can you keep it safe? Of course. Jesus, Ethan. $10 million? $10 million? Ethan repeated. And suddenly he was laughing, great gasping laughs that turned into sobs, his body shaking with the release of tension he had been holding for months. Walter guided him to sit down, kept a steadying hand on his back while Ethan fell apart and put himself back together again. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He lay on his thin cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to the symphony of sounds that filled the shelter after dark. Men snoring, crying, praying, the shuffle of staff making their rounds, the distant sound of sirens from the city outside. His mind raced with plans, with possibilities, with the sheer impossible reality of what had happened. By morning, he would be a millionaire. By morning, everything would change. But as the hours crept past and dawn approached, Ethan found himself thinking not about the money, but about the men sleeping around him. Men like Walter, who had served his country and been abandoned by it. Men who had worked hard all their lives only to have illness or bad luck or simple misfortune steal everything from them. Men who would wake up tomorrow to the same struggle, the same desperation, the same invisible existence. When the shelter lights flickered on at 5:30 in the morning, Ethan was already awake. He found Dolores in the office, drinking coffee and preparing for the morning routine. I need to ask you something, he said. How much does it cost to run this place? For a year? Dolores looked surprised. Why do you want to know? Just curious. She pulled up something on her computer. Our annual budget is about $800,000. We're always short. We rely on grants and donations, but it's never enough. Why? Just wondering, Ethan said, but he filed the number away in his mind. He left the shelter at 6, walking the 3 blocks to where he had parked his borrowed bicycle the day before. Marcus lived 2 hours away by car, but Ethan couldn't wait. He had called an Uber with the last of his available credit, and it arrived at 6:15, a beat-up Toyota driven by a man who didn't ask questions about why someone was getting picked up at a homeless shelter at dawn. The drive to Oakland seemed to take forever. Ethan watched the sun rise over the Bay Area, watched the world wake up and begin its daily routine, and he thought about how many times he had driven this route without really seeing it, without appreciating the beauty of morning light on water, without recognizing how precious ordinary moments were until they were taken away. Marcus was waiting on his front porch when the Uber pulled up. He held a small envelope in his hand, and when Ethan climbed out of the car, his brother just stared at him for a long moment before pulling him into a fierce hug. "Is it real?" Marcus whispered. "Tell me it's real." "It's real," Ethan said. "I checked the numbers 100 times last night. It's real." Inside, Rachel and the kids were still sleeping. Marcus led Ethan to the kitchen and handed him the envelope with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. Ethan opened it with shaking hands and pulled out the ticket. There it was, his numbers, purchased 3 weeks ago at a gas station when he had stopped for coffee on his way to another job interview that had gone nowhere. $7.98 for the coffee, $2 for the ticket. He had joked to the clerk that he was going to win big and buy the gas station. The clerk had laughed and told him everyone said that. Turned out Ethan had been telling the truth. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked. "First, I'm going to the lottery office. Then I'm going to get a lawyer. Then I'm going to figure out the rest." "Are you going to tell Victoria?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Eventually, but not yet. First, I need to understand what this means. I need to think." Marcus made coffee, and they sat at his kitchen table as the house slowly came to life around them. The kids thundered down the stairs, demanding breakfast. Rachel appeared, still in her bathrobe, and stopped short when she saw Ethan. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her tone wary. And Ethan realized she had probably been dreading this conversation, trying to figure out how to tell him he couldn't stay any longer. "Everything's fine," Marcus said, and he looked at Ethan. "Should I tell her?" Ethan nodded. "Ethan won the lottery," Marcus said. $10 million, Rachel blinked. Then she laughed. Then she realized no one else was laughing, and her eyes went wide. "You're serious?" "I'm serious," Ethan confirmed, pulling out the ticket to show her. Rachel sat down heavily in a chair, her hand pressed to her mouth. "Oh my God, Ethan, oh my God." The California lottery office didn't open until 9, which gave Ethan 3 hours to sit with his new reality. He showered in his brother's bathroom, borrowed clean clothes, and tried to make himself look like someone who deserved $10 million instead of someone who had slept in a homeless shelter the night before. It was harder than he expected. The face that looked back at him from the mirror was gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated slump to his shoulders that no amount of soap and water could wash away. But when he held the lottery ticket in his hand, he stood a little straighter. At 8:45, Marcus drove him to the lottery office in downtown Sacramento. They arrived early, but there was already a security guard who checked their ID and directed them to wait in a small lobby. At exactly 9 o'clock, a woman in a business suit appeared and introduced herself as Catherine Walsh, the prize claims director. "Mr. Morrison?" she asked, and when Ethan nodded, she smiled warmly. "Congratulations. Please, come with me." What followed was a blur of paperwork, verification, and bureaucracy. Catherine examined the ticket under special lighting, scanned it into a computer system, and confirmed what Ethan already knew. He was the sole winner of the $10 million jackpot. After taxes, she explained, he would receive approximately $6.4 million. He could take it as a lump sum or as an annuity paid out over 30 years. "Lump sum," Ethan said without hesitation. He had learned the hard way that the future was uncertain. He wanted his money now, while he still had the chance to use it. There were forms to sign, questions to answer, decisions to make. Did he want his name made public? California law required it for amounts over $600. There was no way to remain anonymous. Did he want to speak to the press? The Lottery Commission loved feel-good stories, especially when the winners were sympathetic. Ethan thought about Victoria watching the news, seeing his face, realizing what she had walked away from. He thought about his former employers, the ones who had let him go without a second thought, watching him on TV. He thought about all the people who had dismissed him, who had looked through him, who had treated him as if he no longer mattered. "Yes," he said, "I'll do a press conference." Catherine looked pleased. "Wonderful. We can schedule it for this afternoon if you're available. It won't take long. Just a few photos, a brief interview, and standard questions about what you plan to do with the money." "I'm available," Ethan said, because he had nowhere else to be and nothing else to do. His calendar, for the first time in months, was completely empty. The press conference was scheduled for 2 o'clock, which gave Ethan time to meet with a financial advisor the Lottery Commission recommended. The advisor, a sharp-eyed man named Robert Kim, sat him down in a conference room and gave him a crash course in sudden wealth management. "The first thing you need to understand," Robert said, "is that this money can either save your life or ruin it. I've seen both happen. The people who succeed are the ones who treat this like a second chance, not a free pass to make stupid decisions." "I don't plan to make stupid decisions," Ethan said. "No one ever does," Robert replied. "But money changes people. It brings out the best in some and the worst in others. You're going to have people coming out of the woodwork asking for loans, investments, donations. Family members you haven't heard from in years will suddenly remember they exist. You need to prepare for that." They spent the next 2 hours going over strategies for protecting his windfall, setting up trusts, hiring lawyers, creating a budget, making smart investments that would generate passive income. Robert recommended he take no major actions for at least 6 months to let the shock wear off and give himself time to adjust. "Where are you living right now?" Robert asked. Ethan hesitated. "It's complicated. Are you safe? Do you have a place to stay tonight?" "I will," Ethan said. "I'll figure something out." Robert studied him for a moment, and Ethan had the uncomfortable feeling that the financial advisor could see right through him, could see the night in the shelter, the bags in his brother's spare room, the utter collapse of everything he had built. "Mr. Morrison, I don't need to know your personal business, but I will say this. Don't let pride stop you from taking care of yourself. Get a hotel room tonight, a nice one. You can afford it now. Start acting like someone who has money, because you do. And tomorrow, start looking for a permanent place to live. Somewhere you can think, plan, and rebuild your life." At 2 o'clock, Ethan stood in front of a dozen cameras and reporters in the Lottery Commission's media room. Catherine Walsh stood beside him, along with 2 other lottery officials. A giant check was propped up behind them, made out to Ethan Morrison for $10 million, and even though he knew it was just a prop, seeing his name on it made his knees weak. "Ladies and gentlemen," Catherine began, "we are thrilled to introduce you to California's newest millionaire, Mr. Ethan Morrison of Roseville. Mr. Morrison purchased his winning ticket on October 23rd at a Shell station on Douglas Boulevard. His numbers 774288319952447 and 1 matched all 6 numbers in our November 15th drawing. The cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Ethan stood frozen, overwhelmed by the attention, by the unreality of the moment. "Mr. Morrison, how does it feel to win $10 million? A reporter asked. Ethan cleared his throat. "Honestly, I still can't quite believe it's real. This time yesterday, I was going through the hardest period of my life. To have this happen now, it's like a miracle I didn't know I was allowed to ask for." "What are you going to do with the money?" Ethan thought about Walter, about the shelter, about all the men he had met who had nothing left but the hope that tomorrow might be better than today. He thought about his own fall, about how quickly security could vanish, about how fragile the line was between having everything and having nothing. "I'm going to help people," he said. "I'm going to remember where I was when this happened. And I'm going to make sure I never forget what it feels like to have nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Beyond that, I'm still figuring it out." More questions followed. Where would he live? Would he continue working? What was the first thing he was going to buy? Ethan answered as best he could, aware that every word was being recorded, that this moment would follow him forever. He kept his responses vague, non-committal, because the truth was, he didn't know what came next. He was making it up as he went along, just trying to survive each moment. The press conference lasted 20 minutes. Afterward, Catherine took him aside and handed him a business card. "This is my direct line," she said. "You're going to need it. When this story airs tonight, your life is going to change in ways you can't imagine. People will find you. They'll want things from you. Please, be careful who you trust." Ethan pocketed the card and thanked her. Then he and Marcus walked back to the parking lot, neither of them speaking, until they were safely inside the car. "That was surreal," Marcus finally said. "Tell me about it," Ethan replied. He pulled out his phone, which had been buzzing non-stop throughout the press conference. Dozens of messages waited for him, from numbers he didn't recognize, from people he hadn't heard from in years. Word was already spreading. One message stood out from the rest. It was from Victoria. Is this some kind of joke? She had seen. Somehow she had already heard, and she had reached out. Ethan stared at her message, his thumb hovering over the keyboard, and realized he had no idea what to say to her. The woman who had told him not to contact her, who had changed the locks and thrown his life onto the porch in garbage bags, was now asking him if his lottery win was real. He didn't respond. Not yet. He needed time to think. Marcus drove him to a hotel, a nice one overlooking the American River. Ethan checked in under his own name, because there was no point in hiding anymore, and paid for a week in advance with his newly opened credit card, backed by his soon-to-be deposited millions. The room was beautiful, with a king-size bed, a view of the water, and a bathroom bigger than some of the kennels at the shelter. Ethan stood at the window, watching the sun set over Sacramento, and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 48 hours. 2 days ago, he had been at rock bottom. 1 day ago, he had slept in a shelter, wondering if he would ever recover from the loss of everything he had known. Today, he was a millionaire. His phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but he answered anyway. "Mr. Morrison? This is Tanya Brooks from KOVR CBS 13. We're running your lottery story on the evening news, and I was hoping to ask you a few follow-up questions." "I already did the press conference," Ethan said. "I know, but our viewers love personal stories. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? What you did before this? What your plans are?" Ethan hesitated, then he made a decision. "I'm an architect," he said. "Or I was. I lost my job 6 months ago, lost my house, my wife, everything. Last night, I slept in a homeless shelter. This morning, I found out I won $10 million. If you want to tell a story, tell that one. Tell people that the line between success and failure is thinner than they think. Tell them that anyone can fall, and if they're lucky, anyone can get back up." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Tanya said, "Would you be willing to go on camera and say that?" "Yes," Ethan said. "I would." An hour later, a news crew arrived at his hotel. They set up in his room, positioning lights and cameras, and Tanya Brooks sat across from him with a microphone and a sympathetic expression that he suspected was at least partially genuine. "Mr. Morrison, thank you for agreeing to speak with us. Can you walk me through the last 24 hours? Ethan did. He told her everything, holding nothing back. He talked about losing his job, about hiding the truth from Victoria, about the foreclosure and the repossession, and the moment when his wife told him to leave. He talked about sleeping in his car, about walking into the shelter, about sitting on that cot and wondering if this was what the rest of his life would look like. And then he talked about the email, about the lottery ticket, about the impossible twist of fate that had saved him. "What do you want people to know?" Tanya asked. "I want them to know that I got lucky," Ethan said. "Incredibly, impossibly lucky, but most people in my situation don't. There are men still sleeping in that shelter tonight who worked just as hard as I did, who made all the right choices, who did everything they were supposed to do, and they're still there. They're invisible. No one sees them. No one cares. I want people to see them. I want people to care. What are you going to do with your winnings?" "I'm going to help," Ethan said simply. "I don't have all the details worked out yet, but I'm going to help." The interview aired at 6 o'clock. Ethan watched it from his hotel room, his phone in his hand, as his story spread across the Sacramento area and then beyond. The station posted the clip online, and within an hour, it had been shared thousands of times. News outlets across the country picked it up. Man goes from homeless shelter to millionaire in 24 hours. Lottery winner speaks out about homelessness, from rock bottom to $10 million. His phone exploded with messages. Some were congratulatory, some were requests for money from people he barely knew, some were from reporters wanting interviews, and one was from Victoria. "We need to talk. Please call me." Ethan stared at her message for a long time. Then he turned off his phone and went to bed, sleeping in a real bed with clean sheets for the first time in days, his dreams haunted by the faces of the men he had left behind at the shelter. The next morning, Ethan woke early and returned to the Riverside County homeless shelter. He arrived as the men were having breakfast, the same watery oatmeal and stale toast he had choked down the day before. Dolores looked surprised to see him. "Mr. Morrison, I saw you on the news. Congratulations." "Thank you," Ethan said. "Is Walter Chen still here?" "He is. He's in the dining area." Ethan found Walter at the same table where they had eaten dinner 2 nights before. The older man looked up and smiled when he saw Ethan approaching. Well, if it isn't the millionaire. Couldn't stay away." "I wanted to thank you," Ethan said, sitting down across from him, "for being kind to me that night, for treating me like a person when I felt like I had stopped being one." Walter waved a hand dismissively. "No thanks necessary. We look out for each other in here. That's how we survive." "How long have you been homeless, Walter?" 5 years, give or take. Lost count somewhere along the way." "Do you want to be?" Walter laughed, a bitter sound. "Does anyone want to be homeless? But wanting something different and having the means to change it are 2 very different things. What if you had the means?" Ethan asked. "What would you do?" "I'd get a small apartment, nothing fancy, just a place where I could close the door and have some privacy. I'd get my health under control, see some doctors I can't afford to see right now. Maybe I'd get a part-time job, something to keep me busy. I was always good with my hands. I miss working on engines." Ethan pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. He had met with Robert Kim again that morning, and his first lottery payment had been deposited, $6.4 million, sitting in his account like a number too large to be real. He had set up automatic transfers to various investment accounts, but he had also set aside a fund for exactly this purpose. "What's your full name, Walter?" "Walter Chen." "Why? Do you have a bank account?" Walter looked confused. "I did, once. Don't anymore. Hard to keep a bank account when you don't have an address. We're going to fix that," Ethan said. "Today, right now. I'm going to help you get an apartment, and I'm going to make sure you have what you need to get back on your feet." Walter stared at him. "You don't have to do that. I know, but I want to. You showed me kindness when I had nothing. Let me return it." By the end of the day, Walter had a bank account with $5,000 in it, a small studio apartment rented for 6 months, and an appointment with a doctor who specialized in cancer survivors. He cried when Ethan handed him the keys to the apartment, his weathered hands shaking as he held them like they were made of gold. "Why me?" Walter asked. "There are so many others." "Because you were the first person to see me when I was invisible," Ethan said, "and you won't be the last person I help, I promise you that." Over the next week, Ethan returned to the shelter every day. He talked to the men there, learned their stories, and began a process that would consume the next chapter of his life. He hired lawyers, accountants, and social workers. He established a foundation called Second Chances, dedicated to helping homeless individuals transition back into stable housing and employment. He rented a small office and began interviewing the men from the shelter, assessing their needs, their skills, their dreams. Some wanted help with addiction treatment, some needed medical care. Some just needed a safe place to sleep and time to heal from the trauma of living on the streets. Ethan helped them all, carefully, thoughtfully, working with professionals to ensure his money did real good instead of enabling dependency or making problems worse. The media loved the story. Ethan gave interviews to local stations, then national ones. He appeared on morning shows and podcasts, telling his story over and over, using his platform to shine a light on the homelessness crisis. Donations poured into his foundation from people inspired by his journey. Other lottery winners reached out, wanting to help. Celebrities shared his story on social media. Within a month, Second Chances had helped 27 men find housing. Within 2 months, that number had grown to 53. Ethan hired former homeless individuals to work for the foundation, paying them good wages and treating them with dignity. He partnered with local businesses to create job training programs. He worked with the shelter to improve conditions for those still waiting for help. And through it all, Victoria kept calling. Ethan finally answered on a cold December evening, 6 weeks after his lottery win. He was in his new office, reviewing applications, when her name appeared on his screen. He took a deep breath and accepted the call. "Hello, Victoria." "Ethan." Her voice was different than he remembered, softer, uncertain. "Thank you for answering. I wasn't sure you would. What do you want?" "I want to talk, to explain, to apologize. It's a little late for that. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to understand something. When I left, when I told you to leave, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought you had given up. I thought you weren't trying anymore." "I was trying every single day," Ethan said, his voice hard. "I was trying so hard I couldn't breathe. I was drowning, and instead of helping me, you pushed my head under the water." Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, there were tears in her voice. "I was scared. We were losing everything, and you kept lying to me, and I couldn't trust you anymore. I thought if I left, if I made a clean break, maybe I could salvage something from the wreckage. I thought I was being strong. You were being cruel, I know. I see that now. I've watched every interview you've given. I've read every article about what you're doing with the money. You've become the man I always believed you were, and I threw you away right before you became him. So what do you want, Victoria? You want me to forgive you? You want me to take you back? You want some of the money? I want you to know I'm sorry," she said. "That's all. I'm not asking for anything. I signed divorce papers last week. My lawyer will be sending them to you. I'm not contesting anything, and I'm not asking for any of your lottery winnings. I'm not that person, Ethan. I know you probably think I am, but I'm not." Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the night in the shelter, about the text message that had destroyed him, about the months of suffering that had preceded it. He thought about who he had been and who he had become. "I believe you," he said finally, "and I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I'm trying to be better than the worst things that have happened to me. But Victoria, we're done. Even if you hadn't left, even if I hadn't won the lottery, we would still be done. We stopped being partners a long time ago. We stopped seeing each other. Maybe that was my fault as much as yours." "Maybe," Victoria agreed softly. "I'm glad you're okay, Ethan. I'm glad you're doing good things. You always had the biggest heart of anyone I knew. Goodbye, Victoria, goodbye." Ethan ended the call and sat in the silence of his office, feeling something inside him finally release. He had been carrying so much anger, so much pain, and suddenly it felt lighter, manageable, like a weight he could finally set down. His phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Walter. "Got my first paycheck today from the auto shop, taking you to dinner to celebrate. No arguments." Ethan smiled and texted back his acceptance. Then he returned to his work, reviewing an application from a 26-year-old veteran named James, who had been living in his car for 8 months after returning from deployment overseas. James wanted help getting into a trade school to become an electrician. He had all the right qualifications, all the right motivation. He just needed someone to give him a chance. Ethan approved the application and made a note to meet with James personally. This was what his life looked like now. This was his second chance, and he was determined not to waste it. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks before Christmas. Ethan signed them in his lawyer's office, feeling nothing but a quiet sense of closure. 17 years of marriage reduced to a stack of legal documents, dividing assets that no longer seemed to matter. Victoria wasn't asking for anything from his lottery winnings, and in return, Ethan didn't contest her taking most of their shared possessions from their previous life. He didn't need any of it anymore. He had bought new furniture, new clothes, a new life that bore no resemblance to the one he had lost. On Christmas Eve, Ethan hosted a dinner at the Riverside County Homeless Shelter. He paid for a catered meal, real food instead of the usual cafeteria fare, with turkey and ham and all the traditional fixings. He brought gifts, practical things like warm coats and boots and hygiene products, but also small luxuries like books and chocolate and playing cards. He hired a local band to play music, and he stayed until late into the night, talking with the men, learning their names, hearing their stories. Walter was there, looking healthier than he had in years, his cancer in remission and his eyes bright with hope. He introduced Ethan to some of the other men, vouching for him, telling them that Ethan was one of them, that he understood in a way most people never would. As the evening wound down and men began settling into their cots for the night, Dolores Martinez pulled Ethan aside. "You know what you've done here, don't you?" she said. "I'm just trying to help." "No, it's more than that. You've given them something more valuable than money. You've given them visibility. You've made them matter. Do you know how rare that is?" Ethan looked out over the shelter at the rows of cots and the men who occupied them, men with names and histories and dreams, men who had been forgotten by a society that moved too fast to stop and help those who fell behind. "Someone did it for me," Ethan said. "The least I can do is pass it forward." The new year brought new challenges and new opportunities. Second chances expanded beyond Sacramento, opening branches in Oakland, Fresno, and San Jose. Ethan hired a talented team to help manage the day-to-day operations, but he remained deeply involved, personally reviewing cases and making decisions about how to allocate resources. He bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, not the mansion he could have afforded, but a comfortable 3-bedroom with a yard and a garage, where he set up a woodworking shop. He had discovered a love for working with his hands during his months of unemployment, and now he spent his evenings building furniture that he donated to families transitioning out of homelessness. His brother Marcus and his family became regular visitors. The kids loved Uncle Ethan's house, with its tire swing and the treehouse he built in the backyard. Rachel told him once that she was proud of him, that she had never doubted he would land on his feet, and Ethan chose to believe her, even though he knew it probably wasn't entirely true. He dated occasionally, but nothing serious. He wasn't ready for serious, wasn't sure if he ever would be again. The experience with Victoria had left scars that hadn't fully healed, and he was content to focus on his work, on his foundation, on the men who needed him more than any romantic partner ever would. On the 1-year anniversary of his lottery win, Ethan returned to the Shell station where he had bought his ticket. The same clerk was working, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, who had been there for 15 years. She recognized him immediately. "You're the lottery guy," she exclaimed. "The one who won $10 million. "That's me," Ethan confirmed. "I wanted to come back and say thank you. You sold me that ticket." "I sell a lot of tickets," Patricia said with a laugh, "but I remember you. You said you were going to buy this place." "I did say that, didn't I?" Ethan smiled. "Well, I've been thinking, how would you like to own it instead?" Patricia's smile faded. "What? The owner's been trying to sell for a while. I checked. I could buy it and put you in charge, make you a partner. You've worked here long enough. You should have equity in this place." Patricia stared at him, her eyes filling with tears. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. You gave me my lucky ticket. The least I can do is give you a shot at your own dreams." By February, Patricia was the proud co-owner of the Shell station, with a contract that gave her 50% ownership and a guaranteed salary that was triple what she had been making as an employee. The story made the local news, another feel-good tale about the lottery winner who couldn't stop giving back. But Ethan wasn't doing it for the publicity. He was doing it because he remembered what it felt like to be powerless, to work hard and get nowhere, to watch opportunities pass by while you struggled just to survive. He was doing it because he had been given an impossible gift, and the only way to honor it was to share it as widely as he could. In March, Ethan received a letter from a woman named Sandra Hughes. She was a single mother of 3, working 2 jobs and still barely making rent. Her oldest son, a 17-year-old named Marcus, who shared Ethan's brother's name, had been accepted to Stanford University with a full academic scholarship, but the scholarship didn't cover living expenses, books, or travel. Sandra had been trying to save, but every time she got close to having enough, something happened: a car repair, a medical bill, an unexpected expense that wiped out her progress. She had seen Ethan's story on the news and had spent 3 weeks debating whether to write to him. She wasn't asking for a handout, she insisted in her letter. She just wanted advice, wanted to know if there were programs or resources that could help her son achieve his dreams. Ethan called her that evening. "Mrs. Hughes, this is Ethan Morrison. I got your letter." "Oh my God," Sandra said, her voice shaking. "I didn't think you would actually call. I'm so sorry to bother you. I know you must get thousands of letters." "I do," Ethan admitted, "but yours stood out. Tell me about your son." Sandra talked for 20 minutes about Marcus Hughes, about his perfect grades, and his volunteer work, and his dream of becoming a doctor. She talked about how hard he had worked, how he had never complained about their circumstances, how he tutored other kids for free and worked part-time at a grocery store to help with family expenses. "He deserves this opportunity," Sandra said, her voice breaking. "He deserves it so much, and I'm terrified I'm going to be the reason he can't take it." "He's not going to miss this opportunity," Ethan said. "I'm going to make sure of it. I'm going to cover his living expenses for all 4 years, room, board, books, travel, everything he needs. And Mrs. Hughes, I'm going to set up a fund for you too, so you can stop working 2 jobs and have some breathing room." Sandra started crying. "I can't accept that. It's too much." "It's not too much. It's exactly enough. Your son worked hard for his scholarship. You worked hard to raise him. You both deserve support. Please, let me do this." Marcus Hughes started at Stanford in the fall, and Ethan attended his move-in day, helping carry boxes up to his dorm room and meeting his roommates. The young man hugged Ethan before he left, his eyes bright with tears and gratitude, and Ethan felt something shift inside him, a sense of purpose that went beyond his own healing. This was what the money was for. Not for yachts or mansions or status symbols, but for moments like this, for changing lives, for giving people the chances they deserved, but circumstances had denied them. By the time Ethan's lottery anniversary arrived, second chances had helped over 300 individuals transition out of homelessness. The foundation had expanded to include job training programs, mental health services, and addiction treatment partnerships. Ethan had personally funded the education of 12 students from low-income families. He had helped 5 families avoid foreclosure. He had donated to a dozen other charities working on poverty, housing, and social justice issues. And he had saved enough to ensure that even if he never worked another day in his life, even if he gave away most of what he had, he would still be comfortable, still be secure, still be okay. The local news wanted to do a story about the anniversary, and Ethan agreed, on the condition that they focused not on him but on the people he had helped. The segment featured Walter, who was now working full-time as a mechanic and renting a small house. It featured a woman named Grace, who had been living in her car with her 2 children and now had an apartment and a job as a medical assistant. It featured Marcus Hughes, calling in from Stanford to talk about how one phone call had changed his entire life. At the end of the segment, the reporter asked Ethan what he had learned in the past year. "I learned that the difference between success and failure is usually just luck and timing," Ethan said. "I learned that the people we ignore and overlook are often the ones who have the most to teach us about resilience and hope." And I learned that money can't buy happiness, but it can buy opportunity, and opportunity is something everyone deserves. Do you have any regrets? The reporter asked. Ethan thought about Victoria, about the night in the shelter, about all the pain and loss that had preceded his win. He thought about the person he had been and the person he had become. No, he said honestly, I don't regret anything, even the hardest parts. Especially the hardest parts. They made me who I am now. That night, Ethan drove to the shelter one more time. It had been months since he had been back, his foundation now operating out of proper offices with professional staff. But he wanted to see where it had all started, wanted to remember the feeling of sitting on that cot and wondering if he would ever matter again. Dolores was still there, still running the night shift with the same tired dedication. She smiled when she saw him. Look who it is, our success story. I'm just one success story, Ethan said. There should be more. There will be, Dolores said. Because of what you're doing, you've changed the conversation about homelessness in this city. People are paying attention now. Ethan walked through the shelter, past the rows of cots, past the men who were just arriving for the night. Some were regulars he recognized from his own time here. Others were new, their faces showing the same shock and despair he had felt when he first walked through these doors. He stopped at cot number 47, the one he had slept in, and sat down on the edge. The fluorescent lights still buzzed overhead, the air still smelled of disinfectant and desperation. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had changed. A young man approached hesitantly, maybe 25, with haunted eyes and a backpack that probably held everything he owned. Is this spot taken? The young man asked. No, Ethan said, standing up. It's all yours. First night? The young man asked. And Ethan realized he must look out of place, too clean, too well-dressed to belong here. Not mine, Ethan said, but I remember my first night. It was the worst night of my life. Yeah, the young man said, sinking onto the cot. I believe that. Ethan pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card for second chances. He handed it to the young man. Come see me tomorrow. This address. We help people get back on their feet. Housing, job training, whatever you need, just come by. The young man looked at the card, then at Ethan, suspicion and hope warring in his expression. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Because someone helped me when I needed it, Ethan said, and because you deserve a second chance. Everyone does. He left the shelter as the lights dimmed for the night, walking out into the cool evening air. His car was parked in the same spot where his old Honda had been that first night, when he had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment, looking back at the building, thinking about everything that had happened since then. His phone buzzed. A text from Walter. Just got promoted to shop supervisor. Drinks tomorrow to celebrate? Ethan smiled and texted back his congratulations. Then another message came in, this one from Marcus Hughes. Got an A on my first college midterm. Thank you for making this possible. And another from Patricia at the Shell station. Just hired 3 new employees and gave them all living wages. Following your example. The messages kept coming, a steady stream of updates from the lives he had touched, the people he had helped, the ripples spreading outward from one impossible stroke of luck. Ethan started his car and pulled out of the parking lot, driving through the streets of Sacramento, past the neighborhoods where people slept in warm beds and never worried about where their next meal would come from. Past the alleys where others huddled against the cold with nothing but cardboard and hope. He drove to his house, his modest, comfortable house that was more than he needed but exactly enough. He pulled into his garage and sat there for a moment in the darkness, the engine ticking as it cooled. 24 hours had changed his life, one lottery ticket, one impossible win. But it wasn't the money that had saved him, it was the decision he had made about what to do with it. It was the choice to remember where he had been and to help others escape from that same darkness. Ethan Morrison had been abandoned. He had been reduced to nothing. He had slept in a shelter and wondered if he would ever be seen as human again. And then the universe had given him $10 million and a second chance. He was determined to spend the rest of his life making sure he earned both. Victoria had turned on the television that evening 1 year ago, settling into her new apartment that she shared with her boyfriend, a successful investment banker named Trevor. She had been scrolling through her phone, barely paying attention to the local news playing in the background, when she heard a familiar name. Ethan Morrison, Sacramento's newest millionaire, is using his $10 million lottery winnings to fight homelessness in unprecedented ways. She had looked up, and there he was. Her ex-husband, the man she had thrown away, standing in front of cameras, looking tired but determined, talking about second chances and dignity, and remembering where you came from. "I spent a night in a homeless shelter," Ethan had said on screen. "24 hours before I won this lottery, I had nothing. I want to make sure that experience changes me for the better, not just makes me rich." Victoria had felt something crack inside her chest. She had called him that night, and many nights after, but he hadn't answered. Not until weeks later, when he finally picked up and listened to her apologies with a kindness she didn't deserve. She had cried for 3 days after that conversation. Not because she wanted him back. She had moved on, was building a new life, but because she had thrown away something precious. She had abandoned someone in their darkest hour, and no amount of money or success could erase that truth. Now, a year later, she watched another news segment about Ethan's foundation, about the hundreds of lives he had changed, and she felt proud of him despite everything. He had become the man she always hoped he would be, just not for her. Trevor walked into the room, loosening his tie after another long day at the office. "Still watching stories about your ex? He's doing something amazing," Victoria said. "He got lucky," Trevor replied dismissively. "Won the lottery. Anyone would look good with $10 million. But Victoria shook her head because she understood something Trevor never would. Ethan hadn't just gotten lucky with the lottery. He had gotten lucky in the way that mattered most. He had been tested, had been broken, had been reduced to nothing, and he had come through it with his humanity intact. That was the real miracle, and it had nothing to do with money. The years passed, and Second Chances grew into one of the most successful homeless intervention programs in California. Ethan's initial $10 million had been invested wisely, generating returns that funded ongoing operations. Corporate sponsors came on board, impressed by the foundation's transparency and measurable results. Other philanthropists contributed, wanting to be part of something that actually worked. By year 5, Second Chances had helped over 1,500 people transition out of homelessness. The success rate was remarkable, 73% of participants maintaining stable housing for at least 2 years after completing the program. The foundation had expanded to 10 California cities and was being studied as a model for replication in other states. Ethan was invited to speak at conferences, to advise lawmakers on homeless policy, to share his story at fundraisers and galas. He was featured in magazines as one of the most impactful philanthropists of his generation. He won awards and accolades and praise from people who would never understand what it felt like to sleep on a shelter cot and wonder if you mattered. But through it all, he never forgot. Every month, without fail, he spent one night at the Riverside County homeless shelter, sleeping on a cot, eating the same food, talking with the men who were where he had once been. He did it to remind himself, to stay grounded, to ensure that success didn't make him lose sight of what was real. Walter Chen became the foundation's outreach coordinator, using his own experience to connect with homeless individuals who were afraid to trust the system. He was brilliant at it, patient and kind, and utterly without judgment. He saved lives simply by seeing people, by treating them as worthy of dignity and respect. Marcus Hughes graduated from Stanford with honors and was accepted to medical school at UCSF. He came home every summer to volunteer at Second Chances, working in the foundation's health clinic and providing free medical care to those who needed it most. He told everyone who would listen that he owed his success to one phone call from a man who believed in second chances. Patricia ran her Shell station with the same philosophy Ethan had taught her, hiring people other employers overlooked, paying above minimum wage, treating her employees like family. She became a quiet philanthropist herself, donating portions of her profits to local charities and helping other small business owners succeed. The ripples spread outward, touching lives in ways Ethan could never fully track or measure. On the 10th anniversary of his lottery win, Ethan stood once again in the Riverside County homeless shelter, but this time the building looked different. The county had renovated it, using a combination of public funds and a large donation from Second Chances. The cots had been replaced with actual beds, separated by privacy dividers. The bathrooms had been updated. The cafeteria served nutritious meals, prepared by a professional chef who volunteered his time. There was a medical clinic, a job counseling center, and a computer lab where men could work on resumes and job applications. It was still a shelter, still a place of last resort, but it was better. It was more humane. Dolores Martinez, now retired but still volunteering part-time, walked up beside Ethan as he surveyed the changes. "You did this," she said. "We did this," Ethan corrected. "All of us together." "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't won?" Dolores asked. "Where you would be now?" Ethan considered the question honestly. "I think I would have survived. Eventually I would have found work, found a place to live, rebuilt my life. It would have been harder, would have taken longer, but I would have made it. The difference is, I wouldn't have been able to help all these other people. That's what the money gave me. Not security for myself, but the ability to provide security for others." That evening, the foundation hosted a gala to celebrate 10 years of operation. Hundreds of people attended, including many whose lives had been changed by Second Chances. They shared their stories, stood on stage, and talked about where they had been and where they were now. A woman named Jennifer spoke about living in her car with her daughter, about finding hope through the foundation's family program, about now owning her own business and buying her first house. A man named David talked about his addiction, about cycling through jail and shelters for years, about finally getting sober through the foundation's treatment partnerships, about now working as a counselor, helping others fight the same demons. A young woman named Alicia described aging out of foster care with nowhere to go, about sleeping on friends' couches until the friends got tired of her, about Second Chances giving her job training and housing stability, about her upcoming graduation from community college. Story after story, life after life, each one a testament to what was possible when people were given genuine opportunities instead of empty promises. At the end of the evening, Ethan took the stage for closing remarks. He looked out over the crowd, at the faces of people who had been saved and people who had done the saving, and he felt something settle in his chest, something that had been restless for 10 years. "I was abandoned," he said, his voice carrying through the ballroom. "Not just by my wife, though that happened too. I was abandoned by a society that looks at people struggling and assumes they're lazy, assumes they're somehow less deserving of compassion and help. I was abandoned by an economic system that can destroy years of hard work with a single pink slip. I was abandoned by my own belief that I was immune to catastrophe, that bad things happen to other people but never to people like me." The room was silent, everyone listening. "And then I won $10 million, and suddenly I mattered again. Suddenly people cared about my story, wanted to help, wanted to be associated with my success. But here's the truth. I mattered before the money. I mattered when I was sleeping in that shelter, when I had nothing, when I was invisible. We all matter. Every single person in this room, every person sleeping on the streets tonight, every person struggling to survive. We all matter." He paused, looking at Walter in the crowd, at Marcus Hughes home from medical school, at Patricia who had closed her gas station for the night to be here, at all the people whose lives had intersected with his. "I got lucky, impossibly, incredibly lucky. But luck shouldn't be the difference between having a future and having nothing. No one should have to win the lottery to get a second chance. That's what we're fighting for." That's why this foundation exists, not to replicate my miracle, but to make miracles unnecessary. To build a world where everyone gets the support they need to survive the hard times and thrive in the good ones. The applause started slowly, then built into something powerful, something that felt like hope made audible. After the gala, after the guests had left and the cleanup crew had packed away the tables and chairs, Ethan stood alone in the empty ballroom. His phone buzzed with a text from a number he had deleted years ago but still recognized. Victoria. Saw the gala coverage on the news. I'm proud of you. You became someone extraordinary. Ethan stared at the message for a long moment, then he typed a reply. I was always extraordinary. We all are. It just took me losing everything to realize it. He hit send and then blocked the number, not out of anger but out of closure. That chapter of his life was finished, the pages turned, the story told. He walked out of the ballroom into the cool night air, where his car waited in the parking lot. It was a nice car, comfortable and reliable, but not extravagant. He had never developed a taste for luxury, had never wanted the mansions and yachts that other lottery winners flaunted. He had everything he needed, a home, meaningful work, and the knowledge that his life had made a difference. Driving through Sacramento that night, Ethan passed the Shell station where Patricia had sold him his winning ticket, now closed but with a sign in the window advertising job openings with competitive pay and benefits. He passed the street where his old house had been before the bank foreclosed on it, now occupied by a young family who waved to their neighbors and kept the lawn neatly trimmed. He passed Marcus's house, where his brother's family slept soundly, their financial struggles eased by careful gifts and quiet support over the years. And finally, he drove past the Riverside County homeless shelter, where lights glowed in the windows and men slept in beds instead of on cots, where tomorrow morning they would wake to coffee and breakfast and counselors who actually cared about helping them move forward. Ethan had been abandoned there 10 years ago when he had nothing left to lose. But he had found himself there too. He had found purpose and meaning and a reason to keep going when everything told him to give up. He had found the truth that exists at the bottom of the fall, that your worth is not determined by your circumstances, that dignity cannot be stripped away by poverty or loss, that every person carries within them the potential for resurrection. The lottery had given him money, but that night in the shelter had given him something far more valuable. It had given him perspective. It had shown him who he was when everything else was stripped away. And the man he found there, broken and afraid but still hoping, still trying, still human, that man was worth saving, so he had saved himself. And then he had spent 10 years saving everyone else he could reach. Ethan Morrison drove home through the Sacramento night, past the city, sleeping under stars that didn't care about money or status, or the arbitrary distinctions humans used to decide who mattered and who didn't. He drove past all the invisible people, the ones living in the margins, and he made a silent promise to keep fighting for them, to keep seeing them, to keep insisting that they mattered. Because they did. They always had, and so did he. Even on that night 10 years ago, when he sat on cot number 47 with nothing but a duffel bag and a dying phone, he had mattered. He just hadn't known it yet. Now he did. And he would spend the rest of his life making sure everyone else knew it too. The next morning, Ethan Morrison woke in his comfortable bed, made coffee in his quiet kitchen, and went to work, changing lives, one person at a time, one second chance at a time. And somewhere across Sacramento, men woke in the shelter, ate breakfast, and met with counselors who actually cared. Some of them would find housing today, some would find jobs. Some would find hope they thought they had lost forever, because 10 years ago, one man had been abandoned in their midst, and the next day, that man had won $10 million. But more importantly, he had won back his humanity, and he had never let it go again. My wonderful, real family. What a journey. What a testimony. From a man abandoned on cot number 47, to a man who rose, rebuilt, and became a blessing to thousands. Ethan Morrison's story reminds us of one unshakable truth. Life can break you, but God can rebuild you bigger than before. People may walk away when the storms hit, doors may close, hearts may harden. But when God decides to rewrite your story, no man rejection can stop your divine elevation. If God could lift Ethan from a shelter to a destiny he never imagined, then your own breakthrough is not far. Your own restoration is not delayed. Your own testimony will shock those who counted you out. And I pray for you today. May God Almighty turn your pain into power, your tears into testimony, and your setbacks into sudden celebrations. Amen. My lovely family, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Comment below and say, "My own story will change too." Let this declaration go around the world and touch lives everywhere. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this family. And as always, I am Mr. Reality, and I am with you. See you in the next story.